Former Beatle John Lennon, who was 40, was shot and killed last night outside his luxury apartment in New York. The alleged killer is an unemployed security guard and printer who had lived in Hawaii.
Ole, in the music biz, there's a lot to do about false flag assassinations. Can you tell me something about John Lennon?
I can indeed. It's important to understand that the power structures that are trying to control the world, of course they're very intelligent and they will focus on areas that they know can help to control and affect the population in the most efficient way. So what would be the natural choices? Media, film, music. These are three main areas where it would be logic to try and control. And I would suggest, like many other researchers, that they have really hijacked these areas, and that many of the groups and so on that have played a very important role through music have actually been manipulated to play with our minds and direct our attention in a certain way, or direct the nation's attention in a certain way, and so on. And the Beatles is one group where many researchers have put major question marks around a lot of it. I loved the music, so I've been shocked many times along the way of finding out, whoa, another what the hell and what around the Beatles. And many other groups as well, it's not only the Beatles. John Lennon, why was he killed? Major question mark. There are several different theories, but what I can tell you is how he was killed. The official story is that there was a young lone crazy guy. We're back to the lone crazy guy. They always wanted to be a lone crazy guy because alone, then by law, there's no conspiracy, no planning. He was alone. And crazy, the reason why they want him crazy or mentally weak is that then there was no motive. He was just crazy, and he went up and he shot the guy. No motive, no nothing, thank you. And if that guy is put away or shot dead on sight, then thank you, case closed, and go home, go back to sleep. That's how they want it. These patsies, some of them have been mind controlled. This can be hard for some people to accept, but there is such a thing as mind control to a certain extent. This is something that has been developed from the 50s and onwards. When it started with operations like MK Ultra and these type that have been quite famous through films and so on also, where you can control a patsy. I would suggest that the people that have been controlled most of the times are not the ones that carry out the assassination itself. They're only there to take the fall for it. The assassinations themselves are carried out by professionals. People that are good at killing. And what they often do is an ambush with several shooters to make sure that the victim is dead. Then the team gets out of there very quickly and the patsy stays behind and gets taken. So what happened this day? It said that Mark Chapman, the lone weird guy, was obsessed with John Lennon, and that he wanted to. He was standing outside the Dakota building in New York the whole day, waiting for John to come and give him a signature. He spoke to him once and so on, but John was just in the process of getting back into his career. John Lennon was a person that was a troublemaker. J. Edgar Hoover hated him, the chief of the FBI. They had him under total surveillance, and he was hated by the power structure because he was the one who said, stay in bed instead of going to war. Make babies instead of killing. These type of things. And people were listening. This is the thing, when you are so popular, you become a danger because millions of people will listen to you. He was one of them. And he was just in the process, after several years of having taken care of his kids and having lived a quite anonymous life, he was on the way back to get on the global stage, to do a tour around and release his first album together with Yoko Ono. They were just in the process of finishing the album. They came home in a limo and stopped outside the Dakota building. Yoko got out first. Mark Chapman, the alleged killer, was standing to the right of the limo on the pavement waiting. Yoko got out, John followed. They passed Chapman, and Yoko Ono was walking like 5-6 meters ahead of Lennon. When he entered into the entrance, the building is a very, very bizarre building. It was there actually that they filmed Rosemary's Baby, this horror movie. It was in that movie. But you come in and it's there's a big open gateway. Then the entrance is further in near the back. There's like a center open garden type of thing. There into the right, and there's the entrance into the building. Yoko Ono went, John followed, and when he was halfway in, a series of shots were fired. John went down, started crawling in towards the entrance. Yoko Ono comes out screaming, ah. He's then taken to hospital and dead on arrival because he was hit by multiple shots. So you look at the crime scene. All the shots fired hit him straight from the left. I mean, some of them were so close that the doctors thought that it was one shot, but it turned out that there was two bullet holes. It was that close. So Mark Chapman was standing behind and to the right, several meters away, and all the shots were fired more or less point blank from the left. So in my simple mind, I would think the shooter must have been standing to the left, not several meters behind and to the right. So who was there that evening? And this specific evening, there was a doorman that worked extra there. A nice-looking gentleman in his early 70s, late 60s, glasses, the whole uniform, and things like that. He was standing there when the shots were fired. There was also a person nearby, a repair guy. He was also in that area where the shots were fired from. So who was this guy? He disappeared very early. If you hear there are some interviews of witnesses that saw it happen, and one of the first one I ever heard was Lennon was arguing with a doorman. He was arguing with a doorman, was what this witness said. She disappeared. I've never heard of her after that. So the doorman is this person that I focused on, and after some years there were other researchers also that found out that this man used to work for the CIA. Okay, what are the chances? Here we're looking somebody who's working extra. So I managed to identify him as well as others did as well. His name was Jose Perdomo. Jose Perdomo. And this man for 10 years was one of the highest ranking officer in an ultra-secret hit team called Operation 40 under the direct control of George Bush Sr. during his whole career. What are the chances of one of the absolute most skillful assassins in the USA, standing exactly in the position where the shots were fired, and him not being the guilty one? In my opinion, the shooter's name, Jose Perdomo. The handyman, according to some witnesses, says that this is a serial killer that has been used to clear out many. They say that he even got a list of 1,000 hits. His name is Clyde Forshaw. He lives in Toronto to this very day. He was the second shooter because they very rarely rely on only one shooter in these operations. They have multiple shooters to make sure that the operation is successful. The repairman took off, the doorman was there standing looking very nice and so on. They say that he went over and grabbed the gun from Chapman. I would say put the gun in Chapman's grip so that the prints were from his hands, and then shouted to him, "Do you know what you did? You just shot Lennon." And when you know how mind control works and so on, sometimes these are they're trigger phrases to get the person who are in your control into a certain state. What happened when he said, "You just shot Lennon," he went into like a zombie state and was just standing there waiting to be picked up by the police. Then the autopsy report, these type of things disappeared. It's very, very, I've never been able to find the official papers of the autopsy itself and so on. And strange things around his ashes, he was burnt very, very quickly and so on. So a very, very suspicious murder, to say the least. And Chapman, absolutely innocent. Even though he tells the story about how he did it. But that's part of the mind control. They're being prepared beforehand with a story that is being told. So you will hear when he tells the story, it's almost like a tape recording, repeating the same.
How about the family from John? Because is anybody asking questions to Yoko, to his sons?
I've always thought that Yoko was a very strange individual, very strange behavior, and some researchers suggest that she was put there as his controller, putting him under her spell, more or less. Mm-hmm. His sons, Sean and Julian, were there are also many very strange things there where Yoko Ono is keeping them on a distance. Mm-hmm. And one of the sons, if you see him on Facebook, he's got all of these Freemasonic signs and symbols. And I know musicians that have been in his home also said the whole home is filled with Freemasonic things. I have no idea. I don't know.
The Beatles, the strange story about Paul McCartney. Is he still alive? Is it another Paul McCartney?
This is an area I try to avoid because it sounds so far-fetched and crazy once you start talking about it. But when you look at the forensic evidence, meaning body structure, comparison, all of these things, we all have a unique, like the distance between our eyes and nose, and all of it are unique, just like our fingerprints. So when you compare photos and everything that has to do with a person before 1966 and the person after, it is not the same person. It is not the same person. There are a forensic team, Italian forensic team, that thought that this was absolute baloney. So they started checking it out just to be able to say, you're full of it. Instead, they ended up by being some of the people that are really have pushed this thing out, saying, it's not the same person. The length is not the same. The size of the head is not the same. The ears are not the same. It's not the same eye color. The teeth, they try to fix so they look similar, but it's not. The eyebrows, it's not the same person. And I mean, you can see now the old Paul McCartney, or Paul, that he's called, Paul McCartney, the eye color, the everything, when you compare, it's not the same person. And what you can do, try for yourself in Photoshop. The distance between the eyes, the nose, and the mouth does not change in your life. Your nose can get a little longer due to, that's what happens when we get older, it starts hanging and sagging or whatever. But the combo of this, and this is what software companies are building up, facial recognition programs on these unique measures. You take one photo, doesn't matter if it's an old person, and then you take a photo of that young person, it will make a match. It's an identical match. This is how they can identify you now with CCTV cameras. When you come in the car or whatever, they have this is what Facebook does. Hello, hello, I'm on a photo. That's it. They've got your personal ID. And if you take the photos of Paul before 1960 and Paul after, you do like this, doesn't match. It is not the same individual. So, the question is not, in my opinion, is it the same? It is not. And you will hear in his writing, in his interviews and so on, he often speaks about himself as in two persons, almost like he was totally schizophrenic.
It's not really to do with anything like that. It's the personal problem Paul had, which was not actually his problem, it was mine and Ringo, because of what the history should show. As soon as we do that, Paul will be free of any problem he may have of us.
George Harrison, who's openly called him Paul in several interviews, Paul, like fake Paul, you can hear him in TV studios. So what about you, Paul? It's like not Paul, it is Paul, Paul, Paul. There's super many clues in the Sgt. Pepper covers, the songs, all referrals to this whole thing. I mean, people have spent so many years decoding this whole thing. It's not an area that I know so much about, so I leave it. But I sure know that there's a lot of weird stuff going on here. And so why would somebody make such an effort to replace a member of a pop band? It doesn't make any sense. Well, for one thing, the official story, when you look into these areas, when there have been people stepping forward talking about this, they said it was to avoid that there would be like a whole series of suicide among like young teenagers, and so that was in love with Paul because he had a car accident in, it seems like September, November of 1966, was killed in this car crash. So why were they so careful about replacing him? Was it to save all of these children from committing suicide? These intelligence agencies and so on that is claimed to have been involved with it, especially the MI5, are not famous for caring about people. So that I don't buy at all. At the same time, the revenue that was coming from Beatles as a pop group was one of the main revenues for the UK. I mean, we are talking massive amounts of money coming in because of this band. So was that the reason why they didn't want to break the thing? I don't know. There are many other theories about that the Tavistock Institute was part of creating this whole band, that it was released as a distraction right after the JFK assassination so that we would not focus on that, but instead, She Loves You, yeah. Wow, what a strange haircut they have. Total distraction. Once again, the same kind of method they use to look over here, don't focus on what we just did. Major problems with the height of the person, with Paul and his girlfriend, his butler, all of these things. They needed to get rid of these people, which they did. You had him being right-handed and left-handed. The real Paul was left-handed, Paul right-handed. So you had to have this guy suddenly undergo lots of surgeries. It was, as far as I know, it was a guy that was just about to win a double competition of the most look-alike person in the UK. That happened just a few days before this accident, and then it's apparently they took this guy and say, "You're the one." In the band, very aware of this whole thing, accepting it after some, I don't know why, I don't know what happened there, but after that, they did not do any live concerts at all for a long time, where they said, no, but it was because we couldn't hear ourselves sing and everybody was just screaming. No, they disappeared from the open stage. From making hundreds of interviews down to 0 overnight, more or less, was exactly when this happened. Suddenly they grew mustaches, beard, all of these things. It has been suggested to cover up the scars while they were just still fresh and so on. The haircuts started changing, all of these things. Why? Major question mark. Brian Epstein, their manager, suicide. This is also something that happens very often when a thing like this is carried out. There's a major secret that needs to be kept secret, and then people start talking. They get drunk and they get this in a despair or whatever, starts crying, getting drunk, and starts spilling the beans, talking about what they know. Needs to be silenced. Many other members of bands around them. It's, I mean, The Who, the Rolling Stones and so on, they, according to inside sources, have been very aware of this from day one. Then you have Brian Jones in the Rolling Stones. He was found dead in a swimming pool. When you compare the timing of these deaths, it's very doom, 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 doom. They follow a very clear pattern and very close to many of these events. Then you have George Harrison, who kept saying fall, 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 very openly, very arrogantly. I mean, they did not respect the fake one. And many of John Lennon's lyrics was quite aggressive against him because he was missing his old friend. It is said that just 1 week before John Lennon died, that he called, I think it was George Harrison, saying, "I've had enough, I'm going to go out open with it, I'm going to talk about it." And then boom, he was eliminated. Then George Harrison, I think it was in 1999, was almost stabbed to death in his own home, whereas a lone crazy guy, once again, bypassed all security, ended up in his bedroom, stabbing him, almost killing him, freaking him out. And then he died a few years later of cancer. Cancer is another bioweapon that is being used many times. Not claiming that it was that killed him, I'm just saying it could very well have been. When they failed to shut him up there, he was exposed to a bioweapon, and then he was silenced. You have George Martin, the producer of the Beatles. He has sort of like on his royal emblem, because he became a knight, so he could make his own he's got 3 Beatles, not 4 Beatles on it, you know, and Ringo Starr is said to have said a while ago, "I'm the last alive Beatle," while Paul McCartney is still there. When Paul McCartney was playing at the Roskilde Festival in Denmark last year, in the newspapers, the mainstream newspaper, they said, well, he wasn't good at all, and by the way, you should claim to get your money back because it was not the real one. Then there's a whole, there are different cases where about children that is claimed to have been Pauls, and where with the mother of the child and the child have been trying to prove that they were the child of Paul McCartney, where Paul has totally refused to give DNA or blood and so on. His partner also, there was a woman he was married to that went out big time saying there's this massive, massive secret. They're gonna kill me if I tell them. I'm under all of these, I'm being threatened, I'm all of these things. And Heather Mills is her name. Then it came to a point where suddenly she was paid off, it seems like a massive amount of money, and then everything went quiet again. So what massive secret could that have been? It is a strange thing. Now if you can just look at the eye color of the current Paul McCartney compared to that, it's not the same. It's not the same face, not the same eye colors. And compare the length. Also, one time he went to, I believe he went to Japan, and he was taken for some, I think he had been taken for some drugs, marijuana, in one time he's been there before to Japan. And then he was back again with the Wings. I'm not really sure about these details now, so sorry if it's wrong. But he went back, he returned to Japan and was taken into custody for some reason. When they took the fingerprints, they found out it's not the same guy. It's not the same fingerprints. So there was a big thing around this whole thing. And lots of rumors about him being dead from '66 and onwards. Lots on radio, on TV, he's even been on David Letterman talking about these things.
Toward the end of the '60s, is that when the rumors about you being dead surfaced? Do you remember that? Do you remember how that started? What were your feelings about that?
What happened? Yeah, my feeling.
Did you hear a story about their popularity in the '60s about the LSD and the CIA?
There's a lot of evidence showing that the whole rock movement was coordinated by military intelligence in the background, pumping in drugs, pumping in LSD and these things, where one of the centers was Laurel Canyon, just outside Los Angeles, where loads of people that couldn't even play was drawn to this tiny little village or along this winding mountain road where just a few houses, not a lot of people up there. All of them was drawn into, like, around the Frank Zappa house. Many of these Crosby, Stills and Nash, the Monkees, the Joni Mitchell, but many of them were drawn, and like they couldn't play or anything. Like the Doors, they were not hardly musicians. They came pulled in there like an invisible magnet that pulled them in at the same time, coming there, not knowing anything, and within months, suddenly they were equipped with guitars, amplifiers, record deals with CBS and other major labels that they were officially up against. They were sort of playing against the system, against authorities, and standing up, you know, let's make a revolution, yeah, backed by CBS. In those days, they couldn't accept anything. And then in the middle of this little Laurel Canyon, there was a massive big CIA secret army base with massive film and recording studios. They produced more films than the whole of Hollywood in these studios there, at the Lookout Mountain, that's what they were called. In the middle of this group that was into drugs and just sex, drugs and rock and roll, and then you had the CIA major in the middle of it all. And more or less all of these artists' parents had some kind of connection with military intelligence.
Yeah, that's what I heard.
And the flower power came from there. The whole hippie movement started from the same little thing. And then many of the so-called feared serial killers also came from this whole area. Where these, I would suggest, these serial killers also created, many of them, through different horrific methods, but to be part of what was called Operation Chaos, to create fear among us all. So a combination of pumping a whole generation full of LSD and drugs and psychedelic effects and totally get them off track, away, distracted away from trying to stop unjust wars in Vietnam and other places, and become aware of political things, become aware of what was going on, and so instead distracted into drug abuse and flower power, meaningless music and so on.
I really want to get in the entertainment branch and the music some other time, because
sure.
I know there's a lot of things going on.
There is. I wish there was not. Nobody would be happier than I if what I say was absolutely without any substance, but unfortunately.
Okay. I come back to you.
Please do.
Hey!